Sixers tonight, they take on the Heat. It's an important game.
Huge.
These teams headed in opposite directions. Entering the month of February, Pete, the Heat were the 4 seed in the East. The Sixers were 8th, 2.5 back of 7th. The Heat have now dropped to 8th. They're now 2 games behind the Sixers. The Heat have now lost 6 straight games decided by 5 points or fewer after starting the year 12-3. I think a lot of people, Keith, did not believe in the Heat all that much, and we're starting to see that team kind of fall back to the pack. But the Sixers are now, making their way up the list. That loss to the Wizards the other night was tough, but what do you think is the ceiling for the Sixers seeding-wise?
I think somewhere probably in the 4 or 5 range. They're probably not going to catch Cleveland at this point. Boston and Toronto just have too much of a gap on Cleveland, let alone the rest of the East. But I can definitely see Philly in that 4 or 5 range. There's no reason why they shouldn't be there. They're just as good as all the rest of the teams around them. It just really, I think, in the East and really in the West as well, it's going to come down to health the rest of the season. Whoever's healthy is going to move up. Whoever's not is going to move down, and that's how it's going to be.
How about the additions of Bellinelli and Ersan Ilyasova? What does that do for this Sixers team in terms of how far they can go in the playoffs?
It's going to help a lot. What you want in the playoffs, young teams generally don't win their first round through first trip through the playoffs. It's usually 1 round, maybe 2 rounds, and then out. When you get veterans who've been there, done that, that helps quite a bit. So those 2 guys will come in. They add shooting, which the team really needed. They needed a big who could help stretch the floor like Ilyasova can, and Bellinelli provides that other wing shooter that they've really been missing, especially off the bench for large chunks of the season. So you're adding that veteran presence. The other thing that really speaks to is veterans are willing to join the Sixers now. They want to sign up because they believe in what's going on and what this team can do. Both Bellinelli and Ilyasova had their opportunities to join other teams, and they chose Philadelphia because they believe in where the Sixers are going and where they're headed.
Yeah, and that's something that when we would have this conversation a couple of years ago, a lot of the narrative was, Keith, that they're never going to get people to sign there. Agents don't want to deal with them. Everybody's they're turning their back on a lot of people. It's funny how some successful play and a couple of wins changes that narrative pretty quickly, and it seems that that's been the case here, that a couple of veteran players had other opportunities, and they chose to play for Philadelphia at minimum deals.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's the other key part is it's at minimum deals. They still have their entirety of the room exception that they could have given out. It gets prorated down, but they could have paid both of these guys significantly more. And both guys said, well, we're going to take minimum deals the rest of the season. That's what we'll jump in on. What's interesting, too, is people always say that is, oh, they're not going to get anybody. Well, yeah, they're not going to get anybody when they stink, and they didn't want anybody when they weren't good. And so those 2 things kind of went hand in hand. They didn't really care. But players care about a couple of things. Opportunity, money, and winning. And when the opportunity's there, the money is, for these 2 guys in particular, they've already made their money and the chance to win. When you can check 2 of the 3 boxes or all 3 of the boxes, you're going to be in the mix for just about anybody.
So would you say that Colangelo has a big hand in getting some of these players to come here? Because a lot of the perception was you got to get a basketball guy in, they got to restabilize this. Or is it just the fact that they have a couple of top-end talent?
I think it's probably a mix of both. I think let's look at J.J. Redick in the offseason. The opportunity to start was there, and he really was seen then and still today. He was kind of the missing piece for what they really needed to add was a shooter at that 2-guard spot, a veteran who knew what they were doing around all their young kids. And I think for J.J. Redick, it was, all right, these guys are ready to push it forward. This is an opportunity. I can play, I can start, I get paid, and he did get paid. He got paid plenty. So he came in. Then you've got a guy like Amir Johnson, who he's in that stage of his career where he's a veteran mentor type to a big. There's no better group of young bigs to work with than the group in Philadelphia. And now Bellinelli and Ilyasova joining up. It really is turning into this is how you want to flesh it out. You want your kids to grow forward, and then you supplement them with smart veteran signings around them, especially while the kids are still cheap. You can then overpay in some circumstances those veterans more than what they might have got elsewhere, which is even more of an enticement to join a team.
Keith Smith's with us here, RealGM.com. And, Keith, the one thing is this team has a lot of very young players, Embiid and Simmons and Dario. the Fultz situation has been completely bizarre. Who knows what his future will end up being, whether he'll be an impact player or not. However, the fact of the matter is they still have the ability to continue growing this team. But when you look at this offseason for this team, do you believe that they are an attractive team now to the top-end free agent? And, there's been a lot of speculation about LeBron, the billboards, and everybody's been talking about him. But do you think the top-end free agent will look at Philadelphia down the road, regardless of how far they make it in the playoffs?
I think that they will, and I think it's only because Joel Embiid has stayed healthy all season, and Ben Simmons has been as good as he has been, coming off missing his rookie year. If Embiid had missed more time, those top-end guys, like let's use LeBron, for example, he doesn't want to go somewhere where there's question marks of the pieces around him if they're going to be even available. Never mind if they're good enough to win. He wants to know who's going to be on the floor night to night. Embiid has now proven that. There's always going to be some doubt out there because he has missed so much time, but he's proven now he can go through. I notice myself even. I don't hold my breath every time he hits the floor anymore and get worried he's not going to get back up because he generally pops right back up and keeps going. And then Simmons coming back and being such a great all-around talent and really stepping up with only room to improve, that makes him a really attractive market for those big guys because, again, you've got those guys seeing, all right, maybe I'm the piece that pushes this team from being a middle-of-the-pack Eastern Conference playoff team to we might be able to make a finals run. And as my career is coming on the downside, these young kids step forward to take over for me. So they're definitely an attractive free agent destination at this point.
So, Keith, do you think LeBron is the realistic guy for the Sixers to go after, or after all these whispers and all the things that are going around, do they have any merit? Is LeBron a realistic guy for them to go after?
I think it's realistic for them to go after him. I think it'd be really great for them to, at a minimum, secure a meeting. That goes a long way. Sometimes getting a meeting with the guy gets you the next guy, even if you don't get that first guy, because it makes other players like, wait a minute, if LeBron's considering them, maybe I should listen too. I don't know how realistic it is because I think LeBron is at this point where he wants to for sure be in the finals every year. And I think they might still, even if you added him to this group, they might be another year or maybe 2 years away just because of the youth. But it's worth it. If you can get in the room with LeBron James, you get in the room with LeBron James and hope for the best.
There are a lot of our listeners who are against LeBron James coming to Philadelphia. Mike and I talked about it yesterday on the air and put it out there on the text message board and on our Twitter poll, and there were a lot of people coming in and saying, no, I don't want him. He's toxic. The coach would be a figurehead. I mean, are these listeners nuts?
Yeah, if you don't want LeBron James, 29 other franchises are happy to line up to take him. So it's just, he's still at this point, he shows you night to night when he needs to be and wants to be. He is still the absolute best player in the NBA, not even really close when he, needs to do it. So it's if you get a shot at him, you take LeBron and you're happy about it.
A couple minutes ago, you mentioned Joel Embiid and his value to the Sixers. I'm wondering if you saw or know about that. During the All-Star game, they ranked the 28 players that were All-Stars, and the only player that had a higher value to his team on the court and off was Steph Curry. The Dubs go from a 68-win team to a 53-win team. Embiid, and this is from Ben Falks cleaning the glass, he had a differential of a 67-win team to a 24-win team. Is he correct in that Embiid is that vital to the Sixers' success?
Yeah, he is, and it's the reason why is because he is the most dominant player at a position where there just isn't a lot of dominant players left. He can change the game offensively, and he changes the game defensively. And when you get somebody who can do that at the center position, that adds incredible value. I saw the numbers. It sometimes gets hard to rationalize and really rectify those numbers when they're that big of a swing. But it feels like it's about right to me. That's just how good this guy is when he's healthy and on the court.
Yeah, it's amazing. Keith Smith's with us here talking a little NBA. You mentioned the centers don't exist, and I think a lot of times Embiid gets criticized. Some people wonder why the Sixers use him the way that they do. They want to see him be a classic back to the basket center, pounding the ball on the floor. But isn't that what is unique about him? Is that he is not a classic guy like everybody else. He's kind of his own guy. I mean, he's kind of a player that nobody else can duplicate.
Yeah, there isn't anybody else in the league at the 5 that can do what he can do. When you combine, to me, there's always 3 phases. There's the post-up game, there's the outside shooting game, and then there's the transition game. He runs the floor better than almost any other guy his size, other than the guys who are really, they're just superb athletes but don't bring much else to the table. He's one of the league. It's funny when I hear that, they should post him up more. He already is one of the league leaders in post touches in the entire league. So there's not going to be doing too much more post touches that you do. And sometimes when you do that, you have to spot it, because otherwise what teams are going to do is they're going to start forcing the ball away from him. They're going to make sure he can't touch it, because it's a lot easier to do that versus when he's out on the floor behind the arc. So yeah, I wouldn't mess around with how they're using him too much. I think they're getting a lot of value out of what he can do and his skills that are different from just about anybody else in the NBA.
Yeah, he's a very, very unique talent, and they have another one in Ben Simmons, and obviously he has come into the league and really taken the league by storm, and he's done it all with a very one-dimensional offensive game. Do people around the league, Keith, and do you think that Simmons' offense will evolve more? Does it even need to?
Talking to people, yeah, it does need to, only because when he gets through his second. Right, it's always, we talk about it in baseball, that second and third time through the batting order. You see teams defending him a little differently when they see him for a second or third time. And then once he's in his second and third year on the court, we'll see that even more. And what teams are going to start doing is they'll just drop off him and force him to shoot. But that works when you're playing against little point guards who are, relatively little, between 6 foot and 6'4", because they can't. When you drop way off them, then they can't even see the passing lanes. Simmons is still so big, he can still see the passing lanes and get whatever he wants. So it's one of those things where I think he needs to improve his jump shot, but I don't think it's quite as dire as some others make it out to be, because the guy's still so good already, and that'll come because his form's not bad. He does some nice things in the mid-range game. I don't know that he's ever going to be a three-point shooter, but a lot of guys aren't three-point shooters, and they're just fine as their career goes along.
Hey, Keith, any thoughts real quick on Ilyasova in terms of what they need to do to create that roster spot? Any thought on who might be the odd man out with with the numbers? I know a lot of people here would say just get rid of Bayless, but he's got a contract for next season too, so that makes him kind of hard to get rid of, right?
Yeah, it does. So as a salary cap and roster nerd, I can't wait to see who they bring, or who they let go of to bring Ilyasova in. It's just one of the things I'm really looking forward to. The reason why you probably don't want to move Bayless is, even though he has little to no value to the Sixers on the floor, that 8.7 cap number next year is very useful in a potential trade. And that may be the way they are able to bring in future talent and bring guys in. You could, trade him as well as attach him to somebody else, and now you're bringing in a higher salary player. So for me, that leaves really at that point, you're looking at probably Trevor Booker, because Amir Johnson and J.J. Redick are the only guys, along with Booker, who are expiring contracts. Those two guys are rotation players. They're not going anywhere. So to me, it feels odd because they only traded for Booker a month or two ago, but it feels like he seems like the guy, unless they really want to give up on somebody who's still on a rookie contract, and that also seems unlikely. So if I had to put my money anywhere, I'd put it on Trevor Booker being the guy who goes out as Ilyasova comes in.
That's interesting, because we were talking yesterday about that, something similar where do they value Amir Johnson more than Booker? Because essentially, I guess if you bring Ilyasova in, you could slide Booker into the Amir Johnson minutes, right? I mean, if they like Booker more than they like Amir, I don't know. It's hard to gauge that right now. It seems like they like Johnson maybe a little bit more, but they've been playing in different roles. But can you use Booker in the Johnson role? Or where does Richaun Holmes fit into all this? And do they feel comfortable with Richaun Holmes and Booker and letting Amir go? Would that work?
Yeah, I would be very surprised if it was Richaun Holmes, mostly because he's so young. You don't want to give up on a young guy when you have another whole year of team control with him, so I would be a little bit surprised if that's the way they went. The challenge with keeping Booker and letting go of Johnson, this may sound funny to some people, but Johnson can, because he's a good passer and he's actually got an okay outside shot, they can run a lot of the same offensive actions with him that they can run with Joel Embiid. He's nowhere near Joel Embiid's talent, but when you cannot have to fully change your offense, that's a big thing. When Booker comes in, he can't do what Johnson can do. He's not a great passer, and he has no outside shot to speak of. So really, the offense starts to shift away from the big man stepping out and being that kind of rangy guy. So that's the only reason why I would hesitate there. Plus, they made a significant investment in Johnson, and everything I've ever heard and been told is they love him in the locker room. They love his work with all the other young bigs. Not that they don't like Trevor Booker. I would have a hard time seeing them let go of Amir Johnson at this point.
Yeah, Keith, I guess Booker was asked this morning at shoot-around and said, I know it's a possibility. I'm not worried about anything. At the end of the day, everything's going to work out the best for me. And I read an article on Trevor Booker this morning, in fact, that says that, outside of basketball, the guy's got a little empire going from a venture capital firm and private basketball academies. I mean, he's going to be okay no matter what.
Yeah, I saw that same article. I mean, great for him, right? That's the dream. You want to see these guys come and use the money they make and turn it into even more money and do some good out in the world. And the other thing is Trevor Booker has nothing to be worried about because another playoff team, as long as it happens before March 1st, they're going to snap him up to fill in as a backup big on another playoff team. A lot of people are mentioning Utah potentially grabbing him and bringing him back there if the roster spot opens up. So I think he'll catch on somewhere without any worries.
I like how guys who aren't even released yet are already rumored to go to other teams. It's pretty fun. Keith Smith with us here at RealGM.com. Let me get a couple quick thoughts from you on the East. The last couple of years, it's been Cleveland, Boston last year. Even though they were the 1 seed, Keith, nobody really bought into them. Are we in a similar situation this year with Toronto and Boston, or do we believe this year that those two can take the East?
I think there's more belief this year. I don't know how much it is to do with Toronto and Boston as it is to do with less belief in the Cavaliers. People got all excited after the trade deadline because they looked so good. Now all of a sudden we're after the All-Star break and they kind of look similar to the team they were before the trade deadline. I do think they'll be better once they fully gel, and I'm not going to bet against LeBron James. I'm in a habit of saying I'm pretty dumb, but I'm not that dumb, so I'm not going to bet against him at any point. So for me, they're still the favorites, but Toronto's very, very good, but no one's going to believe in Toronto until they do it in the playoffs, and the Celtics there's still all these questions because they still play so many young guys, key rotation minutes, and you always have to wonder how those guys will be when you get to the biggest stage.
In the West, obviously, Houston's on fire. Similar feel, though, last couple of years. The Warriors and nobody else. Is it finally, as the gap closed on the Warriors, do we believe that somebody can push them in the West?
Yeah, I'm not going to pick against the Warriors, but the Rockets are closer than anyone has been the last couple of seasons. There is a path for the Rockets to upset the Warriors. They get a couple games where they hit 18 to 23 pointers, and all of a sudden they win those ones. Then you always have the one game where James Harden scores 50 and almost wins it by himself. Now you're in a Game 7, and as we all know, anything can happen in a Game 7. So for me, it's closer than it's ever been since the Warriors started this run over the last 3-4 years, and that's going to be the Houston Rockets. They're going to be right there, barring some unfortunate injury. They're going to be right there challenging Golden State all the way.
Keith Smith, give him a follow at Keith Smith NBA, contributor for RealGM here on the Sports Bash Live on 97.3 ESPN. The Sixers take on the Heat tonight, and that game is right here on 97.3. Keith, always a pleasure, pal. Appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.